A tour of old San Jose wouldn't be complete without a visit here to St. James Square. This park and surrounding area has been a center for the city's social, political, and religious life for over 100 years. The place is so familiar to us now, it's hard to believe that at one time, this was nothing but marshland.
Actually, this was the old Pueblo's backyard. In the early days, the colonists probably hunted for grouse and ducks here. Later, as the land dried up or was gradually filled in, the location became a favorite site for such social events as cockfighting and bullfighting. Some historians claim that bears were even brought in to add a little variety to the day's entertainment.
Oh, that's really gruesome. Not my idea of entertainment at all. Give me an old fantasy company show anytime.
Well, by the mid-1800s, it was getting more and more difficult to see a good bullfight in San Jose. The city had gained the capital seat in 1849 and lost it less than 3 years later. Well, this must have been something of an insult to just about everybody because they spent the next several years polishing up their image. Most of the structures that border the park now were built during that period. Lee?
Trinity Episcopal Church. Beautiful, isn't it? It was built in 1863 from native redwoods. The architectural style is known as Carpenter Gothic. This is the original church building with one minor addition. You see, in 1877, the church underwent a rather unique remodeling process. They wanted to enlarge the building, but instead of just adding on, they did it the hard way. They cut the building in half, attached a team of horses to each half, and then pulled the building apart. Literally, it's a true story. Then they added on to the middle of the building so that the church would take the shape of a cross. Not bad, huh?
Another remarkable building that faces St. James Park is the Unitarian Church. Since most of its members at the time were intellectuals and civil rights activists, it was nicknamed the Brain Church. Strange? Not as strange as the building itself. Its design was modeled after, of all things, a church in Transylvania.
Behind me used to be the Church of the Christ Scientist. Today, John Healy rehearses the children's musical theater in there. Its architecture was inspired by the Greeks' Temple of Ulysses. Around the corner of the park is another temple of sorts, the Scottish Rites Temple, with an Egyptian facade. Bizarre? Well, maybe. But you have to understand that when these places were first built, they housed the people and organizations who sought to promote goals of moral refinement and aesthetic responsibility. Although they may appear to be somewhat of a hodgepodge of different styles today, they all incorporated in their designs the same ideas and values, concepts of truth, beauty, and justice.
Talk about justice. Probably the most elegant building overlooking St. James Park is the courthouse. Its handsome neoclassical design was architected in 1868 by Levi Goodrich. Remember the man with the sandstone quarry? It's amazing just how often Goodrich's name crops up in San Jose history. He architected the original buildings for the state's first normal school as well, now known as San Jose State University. Originally, the courthouse had 2 stories and was topped by a glorious 50-foot dome. Early San Joseans recall climbing to an observation deck on top of the dome, 115 feet above the city. Unfortunately, a fire in the 1930s destroyed the dome, and instead of reconstructing it, a 3rd floor was added. I guess by that time it was fairly evident that Sacramento would remain the state capital, so there was no longer any need for such an impressive governmental structure.
As the buildings grew up around it, so did St. James Park itself. The American elms that define its borders were planted 100 years ago, as were the Washington palms. The grand concept for the park was placed in the hands of landscape designer Robert Olmsted.
To help envision his public square, Olmsted too must have climbed to the top of the old courthouse. There was the perfect vantage point from which to plan out his gardens and pathways. Though you wouldn't know it from this ground view, Olmsted laid out his walkways in the design of the British flag, the Union Jack. Vertical and horizontal paths from each side of the square diagonal paths from each corner, and they all intersect at what is now the middle of 2nd Street.
In the past century, probably 60 or 70 million people have walked through St. James Park at one time or another. Fortunately, few have hung around. And I mean that literally. The popular bandit Vasquez was hung here, as were several other unfortunates. One of the last public hangings in the nation took place here, an infamous event surrounding the Hart case, when a group of vigilantes broke into the county jail behind the courthouse, grabbed the suspects, and lynched them on one of the park's native trees.
I guess as a people's park, St. James has had to take the bad with the good. Mostly good. At the time of the 1906 earthquake, this place was a haven with lean-tos and tents set up as emergency homes and hospitals, and the neighborhood churches dispensing food and other provisions to the hundreds of homeless victims.
This great old statue here symbolizes yet another aspect of the park's history. It's been the site of numerous soapbox speeches and political campaigns from McKinley to Kennedy. And no one's really sure what this old cannon's doing here. It's probably no big deal anyway, but there is a funny story about it. It seems one dark Halloween night in 1932, some pranksters crept in here, loaded it with black powder and a fuse, and set off an explosion so great it blew out all the windows on this side of the courthouse. There were a lot of jokes going around about McKinley's last blast.
It's easy to see now why St. James Square has been designated as an historical district. Even though it's had its share of ups and downs, it still represents some of San Jose's most colorful moments. Appropriately, half of the park is now part of San Jose's Senior Citizen Center. We were talking to a gentleman here earlier who remembers playing on this lawn when he was a kid, and how he used to love to watch the giant carp swimming in the fountains that were once here. I guess this plaque here sums up St. James Square the best. From the past, for the present, to the future, blessings always.